The Equal Chance Foundation is proud to present Black is an Honor, The Strength Within Me, a documentary co-produced by 12-year-old Devlin Taillon. This documentary was funded by the Government of Canada. Without the support of the Government of Canada, it would not be possible. Some Black men across the country got an opportunity to share their unique, powerful stories, sometimes traumatizing experiences, as well as their hope for the future. This is Black is an Honor, The Strength Within Me, a project of the Equal Chance Foundation through Afro World. La Fondation Equal Chance est fière de présenter Être noir est un honneur, la force en moi, un documentaire coproduit par le jeune Devlin Taillon, seulement âgé de 12 ans. Ce documentaire a été financé par le gouvernement du Canada. Sans le soutien du gouvernement du Canada, ça ne serait pas possible. Quelques hommes noirs à travers le pays ont eu l'occasion de partager leur histoire puissante, unique, des expériences parfois traumatisantes, ainsi que leur espoir pour l'avenir. Nous vous présentons Être noir est un honneur, la force en moi, un projet de la Fondation Equal Chance à travers le projet Afro World.
My name is Natwali Bashizi. I'm a 22-year-old graduate from Carleton University. Just graduated this spring of 2021. I came to Canada when I was about 5 years old. Right now, after graduating, I'm just working two different jobs, one with Bell Canada and one with the City of Ottawa with the Youth Futures Program. I hope to one day work in an area of law or policy in government. I hope to make a difference one day in where I'm from, my community, for myself, for my family.
So what's my name? My name is Balarama Holness. How would I describe myself? Well, my father is Jamaican, from the rolling hills of this parish called St. Elizabeth, and my mother is French-Canadian, born right here in Montreal. And I'm also a father, a twin, a former professional football player with the Montreal Alouettes, a former GG also, shout out to the GGs. I'm a teacher, and as well as a jurist, and just recently announced that I was running for mayor of Montreal.
Dokin Yaun, Daiwachi Manage Wichigisa. I go by the name of Justin Jah'kota Holness. I am an Afro-Indigenous artist, founder of Tribe Music.
My name is Nathan Hall. I am a father, a husband, an educator, an entrepreneur, businessman, just trying to leave the world in a better place than how I found it.
So my name is Manok Lual, and I am the founder of Presidential Basketball. And we are a social enterprise that is dedicated to bridging the gap faced by disadvantaged youth. What we do is we try to bring as much resources that weren't provided when I was coming up to inner city communities.
So my name is Kenny Onyeka, of Nigerian descent. I am a professional football player in the CFL, and I also have an engineering degree from Carleton University. Yeah, I've witnessed racism. I witness racism all the time. I think it's just depending on what level. I don't witness it at the level where it's life changing. Like people are going to jail, people are getting shot. I don't really witness that. But as far as just little things like being followed around stores, you know what I mean? People being really careful around you, moving a certain way, you know what I mean? I have, for sure. And I feel like the vast majority of Black people have faced, those similar experiences. It's almost gone to the point where it's small, and yes, I can see for a lot of people how it could alter certain things in their lives, but I've done a pretty good job of not letting those things affect me. So to a point, I'm kind of numb to it. I kind of expect it. Which, I mean, it's a sad reality because you shouldn't, right? We're all created equal, right? But it's the world that we live in, right? But that's what this is all about, right? It's about changing the perception, right? Because I don't believe that people are born hateful. Hate is taught. You know what I mean? So I think really and truly, the only way to really combat it is with education, right? Is being able to educate the kids who are growing up in neighborhoods where there isn't a lot of racial diversity. Being able to teach those kids that there's nothing wrong with someone looking any different. That we're all made from blood and water, essentially, and bones. We're all the same, right?
So when I was in grade 6, I moved to an all-white neighborhood called Boisbriand, the suburbs. And kind of like Orleans, for example, right? And Orleans is getting more diverse, but you get the point. And I'm walking down the street, and one young boy says, "You have mud on your face." And I was like, okay, well, that was the first time someone told me that, but interesting. And then a few weeks later in school, this little boy by the name of Francois calls me the N-word. And now for the first time in my life, I realized, like, wow, I guess I'm different, right? I guess that I'm not supposed to fit into this culture, which is like Quebec culture, if you will. So that was the first time I was exposed to the reality that I don't fit what Audre Lorde calls the mythical norm of French and white. And then over time, you just begin to be marginalized. So the teacher tells you, hey, don't speak English in the hallways. So in other words, speak my language, look like me, and if you don't look like me, well, then you're going to be called these particular names. But those are individual acts of racism. Where you end up seeing the matrix of systemic racism is when you enter into politics. Because that's when you see that there's a $6 billion budget and there is one sports center for 300,000 people in the northeast of the island. And that's where all the shootings are. That's where the violence is. That's where the crime is. That's where the poverty is. So many people, they don't realize that they're living systemic discrimination and systemic racism. No one's going and saying, you wake up in the morning, you're the N-word. What's happening is that you open your fridge and it's half empty because your parent is driving a taxi because they can't have their degree recognized because the state doesn't care about particular communities. So it's not that you're going to be overtly and objectively identified with a given name, or you're even going to witness a microtransgression. It's broader than that. There's a heat wave, and you find that there are no parks in your neighborhood because the urban planning didn't take your low-income area into consideration with parks. So you don't understand your living racism. You're just sweating to death. Literally, here in Quebec, 66 people died in 2018 during the heat wave. Minorities, older people, and people with mental health issues. So systemic racism exercises itself in a very different way. Or you're watching TV and you don't see yourself reflected in the culture that is expressed. And only now do we see, we're all applauding Black Panther and like Spider-Man is BIPOC, and like this took like 100 years, right? So many people growing up never saw themselves represented. So turning on the TV, you don't understand you're witnessing racism, but you are in many shapes or forms.
We're still trying to heal from it. Suicide, we're still trying to heal from it. Missing and murdered, we're still trying to heal from it. Intergenerational trauma, we're trying to heal from it.
When you look at the demographic of people who are within our system, majority of them are a certain demographic. And so I think what's really important, my message when it comes to racism, is to really, our people need to make sure that we become teachers so that we can get into the school system. We need to become politicians so we can change the government from the inside out. And so that's what's really important when it comes to being in every facet of society. If we truly want change to occur and we want racism to really be curbed in a way, to really stop, I think we need to see people as human beings first.
And when you see that matrix, if you will, that's when you say enough is enough. I'm going to go run for mayor. I'm going to ensure that the $6 billion budget is properly allocated. And whether it's transportation, whether it's culture, whether it's employment, whether it's urban planning, whether it's inequalities, we're going to make sure that things are more equitably distributed throughout society.
I don't at all think it's my responsibility to get people up to speed when it comes to racism. We all have choices, right? You can choose to be a better person or you could choose to not be a better person. A lack of knowledge is only excused to a certain degree. You get what I mean? I think with that being said, yes, it is our responsibility to educate people. And the reason why I say that is because if we're not doing it, we're gonna find ourselves in groups of people that are promoting racism are the ones teaching the classes on racism. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where, no, I don't think it's my responsibility, but yes, I do think it's my responsibility.
Yeah, so about last year, I want to say June, July, around this time last year, I was riding my bike in the afternoon. I usually ride my bike like on trails or around the neighborhood. So I decided to like ride my bike one day on a trail not too far from my house. I stopped by like a bridge just to drink some water. I was there for about 5 minutes drinking water, just taking a break, sitting on my bike on the side of the bridge when a woman approached me, a white woman approached me. She waited on the end of the bridge for some reason. I just waited there. I just kept drinking my water, kept staying there. And then I noticed that she said something to me. And that's when I take out my music from my ears. And then she says, "Oh, can you get off the bridge? I want to walk by." And the bridge is basically the same size, so like same length as the rest of the trail. It's just a bridge that connects to the trail. So I found it like ridiculous that she would tell me to move off the bridge. It really wouldn't make a difference. People are walking by her as she's talking to me either way. So I felt like she was harassing me. I couldn't say for sure that it was because of my race, but it was a feeling that I had inside that she had harassed me because I was Black. And it was just a gut feeling I had in me, just the way she was speaking with me, the way she was interacting with me. So I decided, no, like today I have time, like I'll stand my ground. I'm not just gonna let this woman like push over me or whatever. And then she starts, she ends up calling the police on me, telling them that I'm harassing her, intimidating her when I did nothing of the sort.
Oh, it's auto. I'm not stopping her from coming by. If you guys want to send a... You're intimidating her, sir, okay? Can you just stand to the side and let her... I'm standing to the side. I'm not intimidating her. Have a good day. If you guys want to send an officer, if you want to send an officer. Okay, then don't send an officer. She's already walked by, right?
So I decided to like pursue like an investigation towards this woman. Pursued it. We ended up listening to the phone call. And in fact, my gut feeling was right. On the call, it sounded like she was being a little bit biased towards me because of my race. She mentioned my race to the police when it had nothing to do with the story. So yeah, that's where that story ended up going. The police never filed any charges. They said that there wasn't really any charges that they could file her with because they can't really prove that she was harassing me due to race based off like interviews that they had with her. After that, that's sort of where I left it off. Like it was a draining process for me. Like after I was told that, like I really didn't want to pursue it. I just wanted it to like be left alone at the time, and like it had a weird impact on me. I didn't really think it would at first, just because I'm like, okay, like some woman just decided to kick me off a bridge. But like even ever since that day, like I literally haven't gone back biking on that trail. Like I never really thought like, oh, it would affect me in that way, but in a way it has. It's a bit weird.
I think a lot of it comes from the top, right? I think a big part of being able to control someone's behaviors is holding people accountable, right? There's a lot of things that you can get away with that you might not think is wrong just because nobody holds you accountable. But if someone is willing to hold you accountable for certain things, right? And I think it just kind of goes against like some of our, I guess, basic constitutions, like the freedom of speech, for example. Like I know, like people walk around and they spread hate speech. You know what I mean? They discriminate against other people. They do certain things, right? And there's within the law in certain ways they can't be prosecuted. I'm not saying they should instantly be prosecuted, but maybe if there was if there was a bigger social agenda to hold some people who do discriminate against other people accountable, then I think we can maybe start to see some sort of shift. And I think that actually goes both ways, to be honest, because I think, like, I have a lot of friends who really believe that racism is only from a majority to minority. And it might be the definition of a dictionary someone told me that I haven't looked it up, but I don't agree with it. Because I don't think fighting fire with fire works. You know what I mean? So I just think if as a whole community, black, white, brown, whatever it may be, whatever you are, I think if everyone could learn and accept each other, and I mean, I don't think it's not. I think being like naturally judging people. I think judging people is a natural process. Like if I saw a lion, I'm not gonna assume the lion's not gonna eat me. You know what I mean? So I think it's a basic human instinct. But I think it's what you do with the judgment. Like if I see someone walking down the street, if I like certain people I might look at and be more intimidated than others. But it's the actions that you choose to take after you making that initial presumption, right? And it's also that education too, right? Like if I knew the lion really well, if I was well versed in communicating with lions, I might assume, like I'd be more educated and know that maybe the lion might not pose that much of a threat.
Last year, I was named one of Ottawa's 40 under 40. And, in my excitement, I posted it on my LinkedIn, celebrating with everybody. And somebody left the comment underneath that no one respects people with a criminal record. You and your bros need to learn how to respect the law in society. And, I didn't know how to respond to that at first. I first heard that and, was taken aback and wrestled with what to do with it exactly. Oftentimes when, I've brought up these types of issues in like a professional environment, it doesn't get much traction. You usually just get dismissed or shut down. And I heard, people in my corners, voices in my head, like, don't cause trouble, or it's going to make it harder for yourself. You don't want to hurt your career by, talking about these things too much. But I felt compelled that I had to do something. So I ended up taking the screenshot and I posted it back. And I tagged the company that he worked at. I asked him if this was the kind of person that they were proud to employ. And it kind of went a little viral. A lot of people started commenting and sharing it and reaching out to the organization. And it was wild because I received a lot of messages privately from people saying, like, I can't believe somebody would say something like that. Or I can't believe people would talk like that in a professional environment. And I'd have to let them know that these types of comments were made to black people in the workplace all the time, and many people of color in the workplace all the time. It just doesn't get any attention, right? This just happened on social media. It happened, during the hype of last summer where everyone was increasingly aware of racial discrimination and felt like they wanted to do something. So it was the perfect environment for me to capture a lot of attention to this. And so it just really made me feel like, man, not everybody has the opportunity to have that much light shone on these types of problems, right? A lot of times we experience this stuff in the work and it just goes silently, right? Nothing ends up happening to it. And my thought was I would love to be able to provide everyone with that ability to shine a light on all of these types of situations and have these stories told. And the other interesting thing was how many white leaders didn't realize how big of a problem this was. And, realizing how few of us speak up when there is a problem, right? And when we do talk, it's usually to our friends or some peers, people that we trust. We're not necessarily going to our boss, we're not going to the CEO with these problems. And so they're insulated from all of these types of stories and they have the luxury of not having to hear about it, right? Because we hold the weight of it. Because we fear reprimand. We've been dismissed so many times in the past that we don't want to, rock the boat. And so a lot of leaders get this false sense of security thinking that the problem isn't as big in their organization as it actually is. And so that was kind of the foundation of Culture Check. And so the idea was to be this anti-racism support center. So for people who experience even just like the little discomfort of being like one of a few in the office or like more major, discrimination that they experience, is being able to have a place where they can go to get some support, to get some best practices, and most importantly, to get validation. Because so often you raise your hand and be like, hey, I had a problem, or this person said something hurtful. What happens? You get invalidated, right? You get gaslit, where it's like, I keep poking you, then you react, and I say, what's the problem? I didn't do anything. You're You're acting too emotional. It's not that serious. And so many of us have experienced that so much, that invalidation, that starts to play with your mind, right? You start to question, like, am I reading too much into this? Did they really say what I think they said? Did they mean what they... And so we start having all of this mental energy when we're at work, trying to navigate and understand what really happened, what went down. So the validation is a really big part in being able to provide people with the, what you did, what happened to you was inappropriate or that was bad. Here's how we can try to help support. So just people have someone to talk to. And then we take these stories, we take these experiences, and then go into organizations and help bring their attention to these types of stories that go unheard, that go unseen for the most part by a lot of people, and bring more attention to them. So we use them as case studies in these workshops to help bring some education.
That experience really reinforced my want or like my desire to get into law and policy, just because it was a clear example of like the things I wanted to see changed in my community. It sort of like opened my eyes to it. In Canada, it's like racism is a lot more discreet than you would find in the States, which at times can be like a lot more dangerous and a lot more harder to navigate through. So it really opened my eyes to like to the fact that something has to be done in Canada, and that these issues do exist in Canada, although it may not be as obvious. For example, if we never got the recording of the phone call, if we never did all that, like there was people messaging me like, oh, like really hateful stuff, like, oh, you have no idea if she was actually like doing that because of your race, like really just like nasty stuff towards me. And it's like that really just gets exposed when people are able to like find evidence towards, like, if I never listened to the phone call, if I never recorded the incident, like...
A lot of have spoken up in the past, and, you raise your hand, it just gets smacked back down. Or we get punished, there's reprimand, fear of, oh, it's going to mess up that promotion, it's going to mess up that relationship. And so we've either experienced it, or we've seen enough people around us, our family members, other coworkers who have gone through these exact same things. And it sends these messages to people that, okay, I can't say anything. I can't be open. I can't be truthful about these experiences. And so we have been conditioned that we need to code switch, right? We need to mask. We need to hide our authentic selves when we go into these spaces in order to survive, in order to navigate these things. And that kind of gets conditioned into us, right? And we experience it through the workplace, but then I think also within our communities, it kind of gets reinforced as well, right? Because we're just like, okay, you can't, that's how you go to the job interview with your hair like that or like that. And I think a lot of times we reinforce these things that we've experienced, not necessarily out of malice, but because we've gone through that. I don't want you to suffer like I've suffered, or it's like, this is what I did to get to this place in my career, so I'm going to give you all of my things that I did. And it's not necessarily being true to yourself and open. So I think it's kind of, it's constantly reinforced socially, and then our experiences as well.
So I think like a lot of these experiences, the way they shape my life, being a South Sudanese refugee and seeing war at such a young age, and then coming to this country and understanding race and color for the first time, I've never had the opportunity to lie to myself. I'm black whether I want to be or I don't want to be, right? And I'm very dark whether I want to be or I don't want to be. So I've never had the opportunity to lie to myself. I know exactly who I am, and I know exactly what the situations are when I walk into them. I think it's very important to teach this to our youth, especially our BIPOC youth, because I think a lot of us are trying to fit in when I don't think it's a situation about fitting in, as opposed to discovering who you are and allowing them to fit in with you, as opposed to changing yourself to fit in with others.
Understanding like the levels of racism are very important. Oftentimes people will reduce racism. I look at it like an iceberg, right? Where it's like you have the 10% that's above water, that's visible, 90% is beneath, right? That's where all the mass is. And so people will see things like, being pulled over by a police officer, being called a racial slur, as that's racism. right? So those are the problematic experiences, but that's really just the 10% that's being seen. All of those things are upheld, are built out of, are fostered by that bottom 90%, which is ideologies, which is biases and trends and legislation that help hold up and create these racist events. And that then in turn impacts all of us, right? Where it's no longer a matter of once an event doesn't happen or we change legislation that everything is fixed, because we are then shaped as individuals by that 90%, by these systems, by these institutions that then impact our interpersonal relationships, how we deal with each other, and then how we see ourselves and internalize ourselves. And so just taking down the statue or changing the law here isn't necessarily going to change what's already happened to a community, isn't going to change what's happening inside of me, how I view myself. And so again, it's a two-pronged approach where it's like, okay, we need to deal with what's going on institutional levels, have voices being heard, represented, so that they can better reflect and really do that. But then we need to build up our communities, build up each other as individuals in order to really demand the change that we need to see, in order to step up to create the demand we want to see, right? Because when you are broken down, when you are told that you don't belong, you're not worthy, you're not intelligent enough, you're not good enough, you're less than, and you internalize that, even when all the legislation is gone and all the teachers are gone and I'm just there by myself, I am still impacted by that. It is still shaping my very thoughts and my very being. And so it's not just a matter of we need to change the laws, we need to do this. We also need to build each other up and help each other, because we have been traumatized and that becomes a part of us.
In the Black community, there's this level of doubt that has been ingrained for 400 years, and it says, you are not good enough. And even when I was at the University of Ottawa, I didn't apply to Teachers College because I wasn't sure that I was going to get in. So we all have this doubt. And then the moment you're able to then free yourself from this doubt is in the moment that you begin to excel. However, there are going to be headwinds because you might not have enough food in your fridge. You might be going to school on an empty stomach. You might have to take 3 hours worth of bus rides. You might have a single parent home. You might have parents who are absent. There are all kinds of things that are headwinds, but then you have to, in one way, shape, or form, overcome them. And the way you do it, and the way I've done it, is I think of it as a positive revolution. So I'm gonna stick in the library, I'm gonna stay on the track, and I'm gonna just keep my focus. My nickname in the CFL was Grinder. I'll just work so hard. I'll do everything I can to outwork you, and no one can stop you if that is, over time, you're gonna win. I'm 37 now. It might have taken me from the time I finished high school in the year 2000, this is 17 years in the making. I didn't wake up one day and fall on the fact that I'm running for mayor and I built this party. This is 17 years in the making and 10 years of post-secondary education. But for me, it seems I'm doing what I love because it's something that I want to do to empower myself and to empower communities. So that's what I would say, is that focus on your objective. And last but not least, you have to feel like it's bigger than you. It's not just about improving your life circumstance or that of your families, but people in your whole environment, people in your community. And once the purpose is bigger than you, then you feel empowered to another degree, and that helps you propel yourself.
And whatever it is they want to do in life has to be so important that they're willing to go through the struggles in order to make that happen, in order for that to manifest. And so I would really encourage young people to, really hyper focus on something that they're passionate about. I would really encourage young people to focus on using their creativity, because their situation that they might be going through as a young person is temporary. you know, as they mature and as they gain skills and experience and as they get professional development, they're able to go out in the world and create sources of revenue where they can change their life circumstance. So I think in some ways, if there's anything I can say, really, it may seem a little bit grandiose, but I think really encouraging young people to find a deep sense of purpose, encouraging young people to really manifest those dreams that they see themselves becoming one day.
To step into the occupation. For this to truly work, we need a new proclamation. United Nations Declaration, self-determination.
Imagine if you gave a young street boy who had a lot of energy and who had a lot of pent up, you know, aggression in many ways. Imagine if you gave this person a quality education and you empowered them with a law degree and you empowered them with democracy. What would they do? Exactly this. So all those trials and tribulations, they make up who I am to this very day. So all the young people out there who feel as though you're making mistakes, acknowledge them, embrace them, and grow from them. And over time, they will strengthen you. And that's really what I would say. I got lucky in many ways, but all the mistakes, they kind of lead you in one way, shape, or form to, you know, the promised land, and we're well on our way.
Where there is no silver bullet to racism, it requires the politicians, it requires the businesses, it requires the teachers, it requires the parents, the community leaders. We all need to do this because it exists. That 90% exists through every aspect of our society, right? So this idea that, oh, if I just change policies, or if we just defund the police, or if I just change the school curriculum, that's something, but they all are something, but they're not going to be the thing that changes all of these issues. It's a very heavy and weighty issue, but it's, you know, one person at a time, one community at a time. I'm confident we can make a difference, and we are progressing. There is change, right? Like when I talk to people, it's very different, the conversations that we're able to have now about these topics than 10 years ago, right? And so there is a greater understanding. And I believe that it's going to create more of a difference. When we can name things, when we use language, when we're able to speak about them, we affect change so much more than when they're silent, when they're hidden away.
Throughout my university experience, like I've always tackled the question of, is racism something that can never be solved? And I think closer to the end of my university experience, I sort of said no to that idea, just because I believe in Western countries, much like the US and Canada, a lot of it is founded on racist principles. So the only real way to get rid of those things would be just to abolish the complete systems that they were built on, colonization, rape, suffering, the killing of innocent people. I would say for the future, I just hope that we can come to recognize that these things exist, and not just recognize, but actually do something about it. Because it's not only recognition, but also having a plan to it's not enough to say, okay, we recognize that we're on indigenous soil, or we recognize that, but what are we actually doing about it to reverse it? Because a lot of the little actions, they go against us saying that we recognize these things happen and occur. If we're still gonna have laws that take away land, or laws that promote racism.
So as a politician, you decide who gets parks, who gets sports centers, who gets funding for culture, who gets jobs, who gets grants. That's the definition of politics, who gets what. So when I came across that, I said, okay, that is where I need to be to decide, to ensure that the funds are distributed equitably throughout society. And then a more prominent, important sentence that I think was something that shook me to the core. It basically said that low-income kids receive low-income information. So I thought back to my life in high school, and I was like, wow, when I was in high school, opening these really, really old math books where the edge is crumbling and it's turned to page 96 and there's little numbers, no financial literacy. I never learned what a fixed interest rate was, a closed interest rate, for my mortgage. I didn't learn anything about financial literacy. Didn't learn anything about law or democracy. And I felt robbed as a high school student of quality education. I felt robbed. So I said, I am going to go back and take the education that was robbed from me. So what did I do? I went to the best school in the country, McGill, got my law degree. And from there, that's where the consultation was born, because I was reading the charter as any good student. And that's where my whole push to become mayor of Montreal is really etched in my legal knowledge and in my passion for democracy. So understanding that my childhood was really, and my education, my childhood was weak, for lack of a better term, was once again the push. And it goes back to your initial point of who are my role models. It's not necessarily I see, some politician and I say, wow, I really want to be like you. It's I understand that where I'm in is inadequate and let's make it better. And I go back and attempt to not just improve my education at this point, but now govern to ensure that other young boys and girls across all communities get quality and universal access to powerful education.
There's a lot there. I mean, like I said, people really try to simplify racism as you called me a bad name, right? Or it's like you didn't let me in the building. And it's so much deeper, right? Like understanding the impacts that it has on communities, on individuals, in spaces, in government, in businesses, in the economy. Like it reaches everywhere. And, it's always funny and sad when people make comments like, oh man, you make everything about race. And it's just like, well, literally everything is. It really shapes all aspects of your life, right? And when you are not a racialized person, it's like you are a part of the majority. You have the luxury of not having your race constantly thrusted on you, right? It doesn't just show up unexpectedly every now and then, right? Versus when you are a racialized person in this context, it's constantly just pushed back on you. You're constantly having to reflect and position and think about your position in the context in which you find yourself. And it's exhausting.
And I know these things have always been happening since the beginning of time, but I think with social media, we're just seeing it more and more now. So it's really, it feels like we're immersed in it. Like it's really hitting close to home, right? And as we get older and kind of start to understand kind of the way the world works, right? I've had a lot of friends delete social media, just because it just hurts too much to see some of those things. You know what I mean? Like I'm personally the other way around. Like I'm following more and more pages. Like I'm doing more and more research. I want to learn about some of these things, right? I understand. Like, and the way I look at the world now is I just think there's so much hatred in the world, right? And I'm not at the point yet where I want to bring a child into this world, but if I decide I want to, I think the ultimate goal for any parent would be to give your kid, right, the opportunity to live in a world that's better than the one that you were brought into. So I think that's the ultimate goal, right? But I think there's just so many different facets, right? There's so many ways to go about doing that, right? And I think the racial discrimination, like combating that, is a huge one, right? Because obviously, if I have a kid, like the kid will naturally be a minority, right? So, my hope for the future, my big hope for the future, would be more love, less hate.